good evening. I'm Earl Gibbes, and welcome to Earl Gibbes Live. And this evening I have an interesting guest. Well, I've been here before, but this time as a minister, none other than Minister Emil. How are you doing, sir?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Are you back as a politician?
Never in 25 years would I have ever imagined that I would be sitting here as a minister. Very interesting.
Well, you're here as a minister, and you're responsible for labor, social development, and public health?
Correct.
So how's it going? How long now have you been in office?
It's about 6 months now. And you know, it's a very interesting change. You know, I was speaking to somebody tonight actually about it, how, you know, I come obviously from the private sector, from the tourism side. And, you know, in tourism, we always talk about how tourism is the engine that drives our economy and how it generates revenues for government and how it funds, you know, our social programs. And now I'm minister and really hands-on trying to deliver those social benefits to our people in as cost-effective a way as possible. So it really is very interesting. I mean, I love my job that I'm on the delivering end, helping people. I think that's wonderful. I enjoy it very much.
You know, it's really very frustrating when you don't come from the political world. You're in business most of your life, and the next day you're in a political office, and then you realize that things don't work the same way in government anymore.
It's true. I mean, the government process is a very complicated process, you know, where decisions need to go through the ministry and get different advices, and then it may need to go to the legal department for advice, and then financial department for advice. And so, I mean, all of these things are built in there for, you know, to safeguard the people and for a particular purpose. But sometimes things just take so long, it is a bit frustrating. You know, things that in the private sector you would just, you know, change tomorrow, in government that just doesn't happen.
Public health. You know, when you look around this island, so many people are ill these days, and you ask yourself, what's happening? Have you ever thought about conducting a study into, say, cancer, because there's so many people on a small island like this now that come down with, say, cancer?
You know, you're sort of scratching a topic that's very broad. So let's take a look at it from a couple perspectives, okay? So number one, as Minister of VSA, actually, we have the responsibility to manage all referrals for patients that go abroad that are funded either through SFV or through government. And so, you know, I see what's happening when we send patients in abroad, and one of the comments that we get back from, for example, Colombia or Dominican Republic is that we're sending patients at very late stages. In other words, it's not just the beginning of cancer, they're very advanced stages of cancer. And so one of the questions I have is, you know, why is our medical system not finding all of these problems at an earlier stage when it's easier to treat? And so one of our priorities, for example, is working on preventative health. There's a health bus, there's a dental youth bus, there's a number of programs. And in my opinion, investing in prevention is the best way to invest our money. And so you'll see this health bus. I think this week it's going to be out there because the Seventh-day Adventist Church has a function on the Pondfield Road, for example. And the bus will be there all week, you know, helping to screen people. For example, about a week or two ago, we just had a group from Colorado of optometrists who came in. They saw 1,300 people in 3 days, testing them for their eyes, and they found patients with glaucoma, with serious eye problems. I have a list of probably 10 people that they said these people need to see a doctor immediately and get treated immediately. So, you know, I think that when you look at the public health perspective, I think there's a lot more that can be done on a information perspective, but on a screening perspective and getting things diagnosed early when it's much easier to treat. So, and there have been a couple of studies. White and Yellow Cross did a study, for example, at one of the hotels where they were testing employees that should be their working population. So these should be healthy, you know, this should be sort of the best health of our population. And they found a lot of problems, high blood pressure, diabetes, you know, things that were unknown to people. So I think working on prevention and early diagnosis is critical for our country.
I was speaking to someone that said, look, in the Caribbean, you're going to find a lot of hypertension and diabetes, etc. And sometimes it's difficult to control because a lot of people don't want to change their lifestyle.
Correct.
But when it comes to cancer, sometimes there's very little control on the person, depending on the type of cancer.
Sure.
And because this is such a small island, and I don't have any family that ill with cancer, but I'm hearing from a lot of different people. So it's kind of a concern because this is just a very small island. And we have a history of not having many people with cancer over the years, and now it's all changed. And I'm just curious to know if there's a possibility sometime in the future to really seriously look into what are the causes or what are the factors playing here, because it's warranted some kind of investigation.
I agree. But for cancer, you can also look at genetic history. There is a connection, I think, between, your family history. So that's something where if people are more aware of, what's happened in their mother and father's side, for example, that gives some indications. And I think still cancer, healthy lifestyle, still eating well, exercising, those things are still very relevant. And unfortunately, these days, our diet, we have a lot of processed foods, a lot of chemicals in our foods, and I think all of those things are still contributors. So I think still the key of maintaining a healthy lifestyle. So even if you do, for example, develop cancer, still the healthier you are, the more robust you are, the better your odds of fighting off the disease. But I think there's so many diseases here that can be controlled with lifestyle changes, like you said. For example, when we do our health screenings, we've run across a number of people, for example, who have high blood pressure. They've been given medication, but they're not even taking the medication correctly. They're supposed to take a dosage every day, but they say, well, I just take it, I save the pills, and I take them when I don't feel so good. So we really have so much that we need to do to educate the population in terms of how to take care of themselves.
When you look at, you said you went to Colombia?
Yes.
And what was the expectation before you went after you got there?
Great question. Like everybody, you always hear these rumors about, well, we send patients to Colombia and they end up staying there too long, that the Colombians are kind of trying to keep the people there so they can make more money, and that maybe some local people here have apartments there and they're just renting them out. And so you hear all kinds of rumors, right? But I'm a person who really likes to get my facts straight, and I like to see things for myself. And so I like to go on what I call these field trips, right? So I went to Colombia, I went to Cali, to Bogota, and to Medellin. And I asked the company, Comiva, who's organizing for St. Martin our referrals to Colombia. I said, look, I'd like to be treated as if I was a patient. I'd like to know how your ground handling services are. I'd like to see and stay in the hotels where our patients are staying. I'd like to see the hospitals. And so I really went with this expectation that I was going to kind of uncover, all kinds of inappropriate things. But, in reality, I found that the quality of care was excellent. I found that the service from the people was excellent. I think I saw about 8 different patients from St. Martin in Colombia. So one of the things I asked them, I said, look, if you have anyone from St. Martin that's at the hospitals that we're visiting, I'd like to stop in and visit and interview the people. And I think all of them had very, very positive experiences about their service in Colombia. Some of them had not so positive stories about the entire process. In other words, being diagnosed in St. Martin and the process here. And also, for example, one woman, to give you an example, her child had to have a pin put in, her child had a pin put in for her leg, something with her bone. And the pin had to be removed and extended because the child's growing. But the follow-up here, they never did that. So one leg was a bit shorter than the other leg. And then the question is, why wasn't the follow-up done when the patient returned to St. Martin? So the patient had to return back to Colombia to get this corrected, right? So things like that really, to me, were concerning. And so, for example, one of the things that we're doing is I'm looking at putting in what I would call a medical review committee, so that every referral that goes abroad, it comes back with a medical report as to what was found. And so what I would like to do is have a medical committee that reviews the file all the way from inception to the end to see how the patient was treated and look for the structure and see what we've done right and what we've done wrong.
So the rumor about someone having a hotel there that really run this operation with patients from St. Martin and their families staying, is that true?
I didn't see any indications of that, nothing. So all the hotels that I saw on their list were all, chain hotels or part of a network of hotels, and so I didn't see anything that gave me any indication that it was.
But you heard that before, right?
I heard the rumors, but St. Martin, the melee is always kind of wild, and then you have to be practical. I look at some of the invoices, and the hotels are $70, $75 a day, so they're not very expensive hotels. So I didn't see anything like that.
Now, when you look at SZV here in St. Martin, there's a lot. I was there one time this year, and I noticed some changes in terms of the staff and the clients and the appointment system, which works very, very well. They give you an appointment, you can come back, and you get that appointment, But still, when I speak with people, there are very few people that feels comfortable going at that building. When people go there, they tend to think that it's really a challenge and that the service isn't there, that employees don't care about their well-being. And the sad thing here is that the customers of the SZV, they're hard-working people. Mm-hmm. They're paying for that service. It's not for free. And I still don't understand why it's taking the SZV so long to really get their act together.
I know that there's a lot of people out there that are frustrated with SZV. I get a lot of phone calls about it. So I share the frustration, the sympathy. I've experienced some of those things in the past ourselves as well. First of all, SZV, I do believe that they're trying very hard. They're coming out with 3.0, their customer service model, in the beginning of June. So I know that they're coming out with a program. And I think,
In the beginning of June? What?
They call it at 3.0. They're coming out with a website and really focused on improving their customer care.
But Mr. 3, a website doesn't serve the entire community. We have a lot of people still have a lot of limited access to the internet, elderly people, poor people. I don't understand what's going on in St. Martin recently. It seems like the government just thinks that we're all on social media and they're leaving out a whole chunk of the population. I'm
sure that they're going to have ads in the newspaper and print pamphlets as well.
And what about television? It seems, again, what's so strange? Still, you're on television tonight.
Yeah.
Thousands of people are watching you.
Sure.
But you all seem to just forget that we exist. You just mentioned newspaper, this, that. What about television? It seems like television is not important. It's a powerful medium.
I'm sure SZV is going to tap all forms of media. But what I've been finding so far is that in general, the communication, and that's what you're touching on, in general, communication has not been as clear for people to understand. I mean, I've heard it today a couple of times, businesses who try to go and register employees, and they may have gaps in their application, but it's very hard for them to find somewhere clear that says, look, if I'm a new business, here are the steps that I need to go through. And this is throughout government, business licenses, operational permits, how do I get my crib number? So across the board, I think it's very, very difficult for people sometimes to get the correct information, how to be compliant. And actually, that's one of the things that our ministry is spearheading is that information sessions, that information program, how to communicate that to the public. Even, for example, when we're fighting things like Zika with how to get rid of mosquitoes, again, this all comes back to public information campaigns. And so I agree with you. I don't think government, I don't think SZV, I don't think in general we've done a great job communicating with the public, because a lot of times the policies in SZV may be there for very logical reasons, but the communication with the public is confusing, and then people have to do this go, come back, and obviously that's very frustrating for people.
Zika, where are we right now with that? Because we understand that just a few cases registered on this side of the island?
Correct. I think it's about 9 or 10, something like that, yeah.
That's quite a small number when you compare it to the French side.
French side, if I remember, they were in their 20s.
I thought it was a little bit more, but still, it's. Are doctors required to report all cases?
You know, one of the issues with St. Martin is about the testing. You know, we don't actually test here locally, so they take the tests and then they send it abroad to get the results. And so I think the doctors are required to report to CPS, but how efficiently that happens and how often the doctors are actually executing it, I'm not that up to date with it. Yeah. But really, you see, one of the issues is, you know, the window, for example, when a person contracts Zika and when they're infectious is relatively small. And so the fact that you're doing the test and then sending it abroad and then the results, by the time the results come back, that person probably has passed that stage. So in a sense, our effort really is on reducing or eliminating the mosquitoes on the island. When we've done a test program in Fort Willem, for example, where we bought OV traps. These are traps that kill the mosquitoes, collect and kill the mosquitoes. So we bought them and put them out in the neighborhood. But what we found is that a lot of people, while they might have these devices to reduce or eliminate mosquitoes, they would still have breeding grounds in their yard. And so clearly the communication with the public needs to improve, because the people still don't understand what they need to do to help us. Yeah. In the end, it's got to come down to the public. The government just doesn't have the manpower to go through the island and clean up everything.
And that's where the government needs to embark on a very effective public campaign.
I agree.
Including all media, not just leaving out one, which is television. You know, the U.S. government is going to put, it's already earmarked some $2 billion, and a huge chunk of that $2 billion on fighting Zika is on information. Yeah, go ahead.
So, you know, it's very interesting. A gentleman approached me from Curacao, and he's produced an animation video about how to prevent getting bit by mosquitoes, right? And I love it because it's very clear, very simple for people to understand. And so actually we're in discussions now with Aruba, Curacao, and St. Martin to see if we can communicate, if we can cooperate on this information campaign. So we're actually looking at contracting 2 other videos, for example, on what the life cycle of the mosquito is and how that spreads different diseases, and then also how to eliminate breeding grounds. And then those are perfect vehicles, perfect items that can be used on television, for example. So we need something that is effective on television, and I think those animation videos are very effective. And so by coordinating with Aruba and Curacao, for example, we can help to reduce our costs.
What about the new medical center? Because we've heard a lot about it. You came into office and you said that very little was done.
Correct. So when I came into office, there was the same basic artist concept that was floated around during the last election, and some basic information. So really not sufficient to build a new hospital. So what we've done is there's a steering group that's contracted a company, a Dutch firm together with a local firm, and they've come together with the terms of reference. And that terms of reference is just completed actually last week and sent out. Now we had 8 international companies that were interested in bidding on the hospital, and that was reduced down to 5, pre-qualified down to 5 multinationals. And they're in the process of developing a bid for a turnkey project, which would be the architecture, design, construction, and maintenance of a new hospital. So we hope to have that ready in a few months.
And that will be built where?
Yeah, you know, originally we had hoped that we could move the location of the hospital, you know, look for what we call a green field. So we looked at a couple possible locations, but none of them really worked out. That would have been ideal because it would have allowed us to keep the current medical center and repurpose it. So for example, you could move other medical facilities like a mental health or White and Yellow Cross could use the facilities. But unfortunately, we haven't been able to find a location that was suitable for a new hospital. So it's going to be built really right next to the current hospital, and eventually the current hospital will end up being demolished.
Okay, it's quite interesting when you look at this island in terms of land, because we have quite a shortage of land, and that creates quite a challenge for a lot of things.
Sure.
But at the same time, a lot of people worry about our current medical center. In fact, that it's gotten a bad rap, and sometimes rightfully so. But they're hard-working people, and a lot of the nurses and doctors, they really are dedicated. But it seems as if that when it comes to the St. Martin Medical Center, there are a number of issues. And I don't know if you realize or how you see this issue in terms of specialists for St. Martin. Because specialists, the fee that specialists charge, isn't that regulated by SZV? Mm-hmm. And at the same time, you just have to drive across the border and you can find all the specialists that you can't find on this side of the island. Now, I'm not a very smart guy, but I think I have a little understanding if you tell me that I'm going to get 5 cents on if I come here, and I'm going to get $5 if I go over there, I'm going to go over there. If the government of St. Martin continues to regulate the fees that are charged by specialists to the extent that they're doing right now, and at the same time make it mandatory that you must be at the St. Martin Medical Center, don't you think we're going to stay in the situation we are right now?
Well, okay, you've touched on a couple things. So first of all, previously I was chairman of the board of the medical center, and so I spent many hours there.
And you understand the problem.
And I understand the problem, and I also understand how hardworking the nurses and the doctors are. You know, at the time that I was there, the hospital was going through bankruptcy protection. You know, had to restructure all of its finances, and really it's the staff that didn't lose heart, that didn't give up on the medical center, that continued doing their job even though the hospital was in a precarious financial situation. So, you know, absolutely hats off to the staff at the medical center, because I think they've been historically through very difficult times, and I think the hospital's in difficult financial times again. And I think a lot of it comes down to the fees, actually, that the tariffs by which the hospital's reimbursed for services that they perform, that basically they're paid too little in comparison to the cost of the services that they offer. And that's structurally why the hospital is losing money. And that's something that, as the ministry, we're working on increasing their budgets, and we're looking at increasing the tariffs so that for the long term they're sustainable. Right? There's no point building a new hospital if the business model is flawed. And so a lot of the time that we've spent in the last 6 months is putting together a business model that's going to work. The other thing you've touched on is medical services on the French side versus the Dutch side. One of the things that I did when I started as minister is said, look, before we build a new hospital, we really need to get clarity in terms of what is the level of cooperation between the Dutch side and the French side. You know, we're a small island. There's no sense having two competing hospitals. You know, we should be synergizing and working together. And everyone said, you know, Minister, you're going to get lip service, but in the end, it's never going to go anywhere. But to the contrary, we've gotten excellent feedback, and I think we're making very structured progress. And I'll give you some examples. So number one, we're talking together about what are we going to do when we build a new hospital. And our proposal, and that's what the French side believes as well, is that we should be developing complementary services rather than competing services. So to what you're speaking about. So for example, if we have a cardiologist on the Dutch side, then the French side shouldn't develop the same specialty. They should develop, let's say, neurology, so that you have complementary services that we don't end up competing with each other. So what that would mean is that the one department on either the French side or the Dutch side would be able to service the whole island, which makes it a lot more financially feasible and makes it a lot more interesting to bring in high-quality specialists. So we're actually in a process now of doing a test where we're trying to get one doctor from the Dutch side to work on the French side and one from the French side to work over on the Dutch side. We also now, for example, have negotiated that the Dutch side can rent the operating theater on the French side. So really that cooperation and synergy between the two sides is happening. And that synergy also includes synchronizing insurances and looking at how we're going to manage the tariffs or the fees for the specialists and trying to harmonize them, to your point, actually.
But I think that the problem is when you look at the fees that are stipulated, it's really crazy. It's really outdated. You're not going to get an eye specialist in his right mind coming to work here. I've known some people who told me I did try to convince some very good friends of theirs to come to work in St. Martin as an ophthalmologist. They said, no way, not with those fees. So you see, we can say all we want about the Dutch and French side. I think politicians are elected to serve the people of Dutch St. Martin.
Absolutely.
And they're supposed to provide the service to the people of Dutch St. Martin. There's no country like France when it comes to providing health care for their people. They're number one in the world. We are listed somewhere down at the bottom. But the fact of the matter remains, we got to get serious about how we look at solving the problem. I see all the elderly people having to hustle across the border. I have problems with my eyes from a child. I have to fly off island to take care of that problem. And if there's an emergency and they call the French side, at least they will tell me, okay, Mr. Gibbes, you can come over now. I'm lucky that they'll say, I can come over now. But you know what? There are people that have to wait 2 and 3 months to get an appointment in 2016.
You know, you touch on a couple things from where we started, and this is one of my frustrations coming from private sector to government, and exactly what you're talking about is a lot of these tariffs are set in legislation, and changing legislation here can take up to 2 years. And that, for me, is very frustrating. So that process is beginning, but it is unfortunately a slow process, you know. So I hear you, and I agree that ophthalmology, you know, again, I mentioned earlier, the optometrist that just came last week saw 1,300 people. They were expecting to see about 900 people for that stay. But we did, again, a great job promoting it, and we had such a turnout and such a need from people. There was, for example, a gentleman, he was about 70 years old. The guy was mugged, I guess, and his glasses were destroyed. He's been 2 years without glasses, and he really couldn't see well. I mean, you had students, you know, and for me, that was one of the priorities of the program, was to get students, young children in there, because these are people that if you can't see well in school, you're going to have behavioral problems, you're going to have education problems, which turn into social problems. And I had stories about children who are coming in and putting on glasses and all of a sudden seeing the world as it really is. I agree. You know, bringing in ophthalmology is one of the most necessary specialties that we need to do, and that's something that we're trying to do on the short term as well, not just waiting for the new hospital. But I agree. You know, our priority is to bring affordable, quality health care to the people of St. Martin as quickly as possible.
You look at the garbage dump, and I know that was quite an issue recently because a lot of people very, very concerned about the garbage situation on this island, and can't blame you because it's there long before you arrive on the scene. But you made some comments about it. I don't know if you want to.
So basically what I'm in the process of doing, there was a terms of reference that was issued for the contract of the management of the dump. The terms of reference, in my opinion, are, let's say, not as detailed as they could be. So I've asked now that PAHO, the Pan American Health Organization, review the terms of reference from a health perspective, from an environmental perspective, and give me some advice that we can, and I have a very good relationship with Minister Myers, Romy, and say, you know, look, so let's work together and let's see between the time that you come with whatever gasification or incineration plan, but between now and then has got to be, you know, probably 2-3 years. And in the meantime, we need to come with a logical and sensible plan on how to manage the landfill. And so working together with PAHO, looking at international standards, and trying to see how we can adjust the terms of reference in order to make sure that the scope of work is properly defined so that we don't have issues, because clearly there are health consequences to having, you know, repeated fires, and that's unacceptable for the population. And it's something that as Minister of Health, although, you know, the landfill doesn't fall under the portfolio, the health consequences do. And so that's often the case, as ministries do overlap to some degree.
But a lot of people are concerned now. It's getting worse.
I'm also concerned. I mean, when I see smoke billowing and you know, I'm frustrated, and obviously the thing to do is to prevent it in the first place. So for example, one of the terms that you would need to review is landfills produce methane gas, and methane gas is flammable. And in many other countries, for example, there's collection processes at landfills that collect the methane and get rid of the gas in a, you know, in a reasonable and logical manner. I don't know if sometimes they may have sort of a controlled burn off of the methane, or somehow they dissipate the gas. So I mean, again, these are things that we need to see, you know, what makes sense for St. Martin, because like you said, this is a problem that's evolved over so many years. I mean, the landfill has clearly outlived its intended lifespan, and there's consequences to that, but certainly we can't accept the negative health consequences on the population, and something needs to be done about it. And so I'm doing my homework, getting my facts straight, getting the assistance of experts, and coming with a constructive plan how to address it.
On the field of labor, how are things going there? Everything seems to be quiet. There's no major labor issues right now, right?
There's no you know, strikes or anything like that, which is positive. You know, I am concerned about the economy. That the economy is, I think, in very difficult shape, and I think that obviously has an impact on labor. But most of the effort during my term as minister is focused on abuse of the 6 months contracts. So we're working together with the tripartite, so that's the committee that's with the unions, the business, and government. There's proposed changes to the civil code, and we're working together to come with a agreement between all three parties, and that's something that was not done before. And I think we're very close. I think we're I hope just a few more weeks away from coming with a consensus that everybody's happy with.
All right. Well, when you say consensus that everyone is happy with, is that pertinent to the 6 months contract?
Sure. There's certain sections in the proposed changes to the civil code, and so there's discussions about language, about you know some specific details. But that's something that they're working on, and I have full confidence that we'll get to a consensus.
Okay.
And the process is very healthy.
Oral Gibbes live and caller. Hello.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
I only have a remark, not really anything else to say, but we were talking about the eye specialist. I can recall a few months back, I got a referral to go to the eye specialist on the front side because I had a growth on the side of my eye, inside of my eye itself, right? But by the time, because I got an appointment for 2 months later, 2 months later, it was gone when I had to go by the eye specialist. But I still went. But you see, those are the problems what you have. You 2-3 months later, you only can get an appointment, and when you go, the way it was going for isn't there anymore, so you can't explain what was really taking place. So it was only a remark, actually, but I said, well, you know, I told the eye specialist, so I said, I actually came here for something, what you can't see anymore. Because I don't see it anymore, but it was there.
Oh.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for calling.
You know, I think in general, the complaints I hear about very long waiting times from either referrals from family doctors to see specialists, or then even once it's been decided, for example, that people should be sent abroad for treatment, that process is also very, very long. And so, you know, again, I hear the frustration, and it's something we need to look at structurally. How do we bring those times down, or at least manage it better, so if it's something that's urgent, we can address it quicker and sort of, you know, balance out how we manage the appointments and referral schedules.
And that, I think, is important, because I think in the case with the lady, if there was someone as to be handling certain cases, and that's an emergency, and they call the eye specialist, they will see the person. I've had an emergency one time, and I called them, and they saw me 2 hours later. So it is possible, but it's how it's handled.
It's true, and that communication, again, it depends on who you get on the other end of the phone, or who's at the window, you know, if the person understands or not, and that comes back to as well, you know, I think it's important that people have a proper mechanism that if they have a complaint or an issue, you know, right now, you know, I work closely with Glenn Carty, the interim director, and he gets a lot of phone calls, and I get a lot of phone calls, and at least what it shows me is that somehow the structure of SZV in terms of people able to complain and get their issues resolved is probably not working optimally. If people feel like they need to call the minister to solve their problems, then it means somehow that process needs some improvement.
You know, I've learned one thing in my life, that the best person to call to get a problem solved in government is one of the workers, if you get a good one. You know, it goes a lot faster, because the way government operates, I call you and they can still say, I'm going to make it difficult because he called Mr. Lee or he called Glenn Carty. You know, so sometimes it's not the minister or the director, but the person lower down the chain can really get the job done.
You know, again, I'm confident. You know, I have some great experiences in my conversations with the staff of SZV. I think they're aware of some of the issues, and I know they're working diligently on trying to resolve them. So, you know, the first step in solving any problem is to acknowledge and be aware of it, and I know that they are. And so I have full confidence that they're working on it.
Oral Gibbes Live, you can call. Hello.
Hello, good evening, Oral.
Good evening, sir.
Minister Lee. A question for Minister Lee. I don't know if he could do anything about this, but I'm living in St. Peter's, OJ, and there by the garbage bin, right? There are people are throwing out like the fridge and bathtubs and kitchen sinks and mattresses outside next to the dump. The garbage truck doesn't pick up those things, and it's like a sight to see, and it's right behind the Christian Hillside School. But what really puzzles me is the fridge and the tub, because it's raining up in St. Peter's these days, and there mosquitoes can lay. You understand? So I would like to know. I know the minister is dealing with health, but not with Romy, but that if something can be done about this, because it's an eyesore and it's just doing nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Caller's correct. Thank you. That in reality this does fall under the Ministry of Romy, but again, the health consequences fall under the Ministry of VSA. You know, I have the same for people that are complaining about breeding sites for mosquitoes. And very often problems are related to septic issues, you know. So I visited a number of areas where people are having problems with septic water that are coming from neighbors that are not being properly managed, and the water is pooling and creating breeding grounds for mosquitoes. And so, again, it gets complicated because of the health issue. So to make sure that those don't become breeding grounds becomes an issue for the Ministry of VSA. But the actual cause of the problem and solution to the problem actually belongs to Romy. But to the caller, I will certainly bring it up with Minister Myers, and I know he's working on it. I know we're also waiting on some conclusion to the district cleanup bids. I know that they're in the process of bidding out, because previously I think the contract for the garbage collection and the district cleanup were connected. Now they've been separated. So the idea is that soon I think those district cleanup bids are supposed to be completed, and then I hope some of these issues will get resolved. But I take the caller's point, and I agree it's something that needs to be addressed.
Going back to the SZV, there was a process of looking for managing director and other people. What's happening there right now?
Well, you know, coming in, they were short 3 board members, and there's no managing director. So we've agreed on 2 board members that are going in. I think we're still in the process of looking for the 3rd, a legal person. And we're in the process of formalizing Glenn's position for now as the director while the search continues for a director, because after Glenn, because functioning as an interim director isn't really the best way to operate, especially a lot of big deals, a lot of things are with consequences are being decided on. And so Glenn is actually in the process of being formalized right now as the director, not as the interim director. So
then there won't be any more search for director?
Well, I think Glenn's going to fill in for a period of time. So the search, because it is quite a process to find someone for the director. And also the director, a lot of people don't realize they need to go through a screening process through the VDSM. And so there's a whole background check. And so that's something that also takes time. And not everybody can pass that screening process. So I mean, it's a good process to have in place, but it is a step that some people can't.
Did he go through that process?
He's in the process now.
Through that screening process.
Yep.
Okay. And you said 3 board members, 2 already found, and there's a 3rd one.
There's a third. So when I came in, there was 3 vacancies for quite some time. And I think it's important that boards, you know, operate with a full complement. You know, people are on boards because they bring different perspectives, they bring different experiences, and so I know you've been on a number of boards, and if you have a board,
I've been 2 times asked to be on boards, and I declined both times. Now I've been asked to be on the board of GB, and that's a process. But before it was.
So if you're ever on a board and they don't have sufficient number of members, you know, it's hard to get a quorum. The conversations are very limited. I think it's always much healthier when you have the full complement of board members, and so that's one of the things we're doing is filling in the board positions on SZV, also SLS. You know, those are important things.
You know, I thought about asking you this question last week when I called you, because you've been in the hospitality business for quite some time. And I said, well, I gotta ask you anyway.
Okay.
You know, did you have a chance to look at the Florida Caribbean Cruise Association session in Parliament?
Unfortunately, my TV in my office isn't working, so I couldn't see it. But I did read the newspapers and saw it. There's some concerning comments in there. But.
Yeah. And I know there's some cruise ships that offload their garbage in St. Martin. I don't know if you have the figures or numbers in that.
No, not aware.
And the thing is that when you look at the cruise industry, a lot of people, at one time you was president of the SHTA.
Correct.
He was also president of the Caribbean Hotel Association. In fact, you gave that up to take this position right now.
Correct.
And in the Caribbean, a lot of governments are not too happy with the cruise industry because they always feel that the ships can just pull up anchor and go, like 2 companies did by moving ships to Tortola. So governments at times are very reluctant to really try to do everything that they ask. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Sure.
In the region. And so here we have St. Martin. We are a leader in the industry. And we're being told, hey guys, you know, you really got to start to do things a little more better. And I agree. But at the same time, when you look at the industry, it just takes one little thing to don't go their way. And that's it.
Sure. You know, in general, for any business, I think any economy, the same holds true. That being too dependent, for example, as a business, dependent on one client is risky, right? For a business, it's always much better to have a diversified client portfolio. And I think for an economy, it's the same. You know, when you look at it, you know, diversifying your economy and not being too reliant on any particular one segment is an important part of making sure that you're stable, right? Actually, the expansion, the new hospital, if you look at it, is actually diversifying our economy. You're going to increase the number of beds, you're going to increase the number of services, the number of jobs. You know, this is actually a new industry, you know, that we're well positioned for. We can be highly competitive, right? So this is actually diversifying our economy. So if you look at it, the cruise numbers, I think they were going from a little over they were projecting a little over 2 million visitors, dropping down to somewhere to around 1.5.
We have never reached 2 million. It's about 1.8, and they're going to go back down now.
Going back down to, I think, 1.4 or something like that.
5.
So the problem is that's a substantial drop, especially if you haven't come up with something to replace that in our economy. And honestly, you know, I've walked down Front Street a couple times, you know, on one of my field trips, and I have a concern. You know, I feel like the energy, the vibe on Front Street, let's say, isn't healthy. I feel that, you know, you can see that there's serious problems in our economy.
Well, you know, Front Street was in a terrible state. All we have are jewelry stores. You know, we're not offering the product that we used to offer. But let me take some calls for you. It's Oral Gibbes Live. You know, so that creates quite a problem too for the industry.
So, and I think if you look at it, since we're talking about tourism, I believe our land-based tourism is in a very fragile state as well.
Right.
You know, I look at numbers and I see, for example, the traffic to the website for St. Martin is very low, especially when you compare it to other destinations like, you know, Bahamas and Aruba, for example. So St. Martin's got a lot of work that it needs to do. I do think that Minister Arundel is doing a good job that she's putting in the St. Martin Tourism Authority. I think one of the reasons that was supposed to be put into place was to give continuity and stability to our marketing efforts. That was always one of the reasons for it to be in place, because all of a sudden let's say the marketing of the island would be controlled by a association with a number of members, of which, you know, some of them were government, but not all of them. And that way, if there were changes in government, you know, plans and focus and marketing strategies wouldn't radically change with change of government. You know, at some point we've had, what, 5 different ministers of tourism over a 5-year period, something like that. That's difficult.
Yeah, you know, when you look at the Stay with Tourists, you have, and the other night I mentioned it here, and then the following day I saw it in the local paper. My concern about the all-inclusive properties. They're not bringing a lot to this island anymore, because the visitor comes to St. Martin, they stay at all-inclusive, and you're not really spreading a lot of the money. If you look at Aruba now, the Aruban government is, hey, we're going to put the brakes on this. We're not going to allow issuing of any license now to properties that are all-inclusive. And they have a very valid reason for that.
Again, it comes back to what I just referred to about having a balance in your economy. Too much of any one product is not ideal for the resilience of our economy. And so I think, you know, that's one of the decisions in Aruba. And I think Aruba, the all-inclusive properties, I think were even with the same owners. So again, they felt that it made them particularly vulnerable if there was a change, or let's say if the company didn't do well financially somewhere else even, that it would have a too big of an impact.
We have the same problem in St. Martin, same owner, same thing.
Yeah. So, but at least they're diversifying their product. They're, you know, the Maho, for example, has come with an upscale product, and so they're trying to diversify. But I certainly understand the issue about people who come into all-inclusives don't spend as much money in the economy. So, but you also do have to look at, for example, I know from the hotel side what's happened over the years is their rates for hotel rooms haven't been really going up. So in other words, if somebody's just a pure hotel, that they're not particularly profitable. You see it. A lot of businesses here, they just make money in the high season, which is getting shorter, and then they have to make that money stretch throughout the rest of the year, right? So what the hotels are doing is they're reacting to that, and they're finding ways to bundle their product, their hotel rooms, with other things so that they can make more money. So it really is a function of that. And I think as well, I mean, you have to be honest. For example, an all-inclusive hotel in New York City would never work, right? Because no one would go there because they say, look, I want to go out and I want to experience all the different restaurants, and you know, I don't want to be locked into eating in your restaurant all the time. So we also have to be honest and ask ourselves, you know, look, is our product really what it needs to be?
But I think we haven't, you know, when it comes to St. Martin, I think, and this is my opinion, hotel rooms, the rates are very low. They're too low. Right. You go to Antigua, you go to Guadeloupe, Martinique, Puerto Rico, they're a lot higher than St. Martin.
Absolutely.
And when you look at the room that we're offering, for what we're offering, it's a steal.
Correct. Correct.
So
I agree. So I mean, and again, these are some of the fundamental questions that we need to answer. Mm-hmm. I mean, Aruba, if you look at their average daily rate, it's much higher than ours. They used to be jealous of St. Martin. They used to wish they could have our rates, but now their rates have improved over ours. And so that difference translates into financial stability for the businesses. It translates into jobs. That issue translates into our economy. The government has issues right now that they're not collecting the revenues that they need to. I mean, government needs to collect money in order to fund its social services. So
which government?
Our St. Martin government.
They're only collecting from the working small man. They need to collect, really make their collection across the board. You know,
it's great you touch on it because, you know, one of the things that I've done is, for example, the labor inspectors from the inspectorate of the ministry have been going out and doing controls. But they're very limited in what their authorities are and what tools they have for compliance. So what we're doing now is we're working together with SZV so that the labor inspectors can go with a inspector from SZV. And now SZV can initiate financial fines for non-compliance. They can go after back premiums. And what we're seeing is SZV, for example, is seeing an increase in compliance. But as we go out, what we're finding is that a lot of people, both employers and employees, don't understand what their obligations are. And that's where I touched on that before, that right now we're in the process of developing what I would call is sort of a quick reference guide to compliance, you know, what's expected of you. You know, for example, we went to one business, a business on Front Street, and when you started asking questions, they clearly didn't even understand all of the things that they had to be compliant with. They had hired a company to help them, but the company apparently wasn't advising them well. So there's a lot of gaps, and I agree that we need to get our compliance up, and not from the small man, but from overall.
Oh, when you're a local person, a St. Martin person, start a business, then everyone is coming to do all kinds of inspection. You ask yourself, wow, where are these guys? How come they don't go to other places? And one night I mentioned in this program about companies that are operating and violating the law, and then I saw a release come from your office that there was an inspection, and they discovered that many of the employees were not legally hired.
You know, what I found is that too often the tendency is to kind of sit in their office and kind of, I don't know, go through spreadsheets, and they kind of make a list and decide where they're going to go. And it's my feeling that really they should just take more of a geographic approach. In other words, just start in one particular area and just visit every business. And so that's why what we're going to do is we're going to finish this compliance reference piece, this quick guide to compliance. And then the inspectors are going to start going out and delivering it to all of the businesses, letting them sign off for receipt of it. And then we'll be back in a month or 2 months to make sure that now that you're compliant. And I think you're going to see compliance is going to go up.
Oh, I think I was seeing the conversion of the Jews, as they say. But anyway, Minister, I want to thank you for being my guest this evening. We have 30 seconds in closing.
Well, you know what? Thank you for being here. I appreciate the opportunity to be minister. I think this has been an amazing learning experience, and I love to be able to deliver social benefits. I love to be able to touch the lives of the people here in St. Martin and do my best to make the country a better place to live.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Lee. And that's it for now. See you next time, right here on Oral Gibbs Live. Till then, good night, take care, bye.